Right, I think we're probably ready to go. So if we want to cut the music, Artem. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited for this webinar today. I'm Adam. I work for Global App Testing. I'm going to be hosting today. We've got lots of really exciting speakers. Just before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. So down in the bottom right hand of the screen, along the bottom bar, there's a little button that says Q&A. It's like two little chat icons layered on top of each other. If you want to ask a question, and it is encouraged, then that is where you should do it. If you click on it, a little chat icon pops up. It's fairly self-explanatory how it all works. In addition to a live Q&A at the end of this session, we're also going to be sending an email with all of the questions and all of the answers. So if you ask a question, we will get to it, and there are no stupid questions. The way that this webinar came to be today, it started a couple of months ago, and it was when TestRail sent us an email with some research in it that blew our mind. And we've been thinking about it ever since. So the reason that we started this webinar is that we wanted to show you that research. If we can just have the next slide, Artem. We wanted to show you that research. We wanted to tell you a little bit about how we've been thinking about that research. And we also wanted to ask you what you thought about that research. And that's why in a couple of minutes, I'm going to open a poll, which is going to touch on some of the themes that the research goes on to describe. In addition to that, we're also very lucky to have Line 10. They are a mutual customer of TestRail and Global App Testing, and they're going to be talking a little bit about their business. It's a really exciting business. It's a hospitality fulfillment startup. So we've got all of that in addition to a live panel at the end, all in 45 minutes. So we've got loads to get through today. So I'm going to start with the poll. I think it cuts to the heart of what TestRail's research talks about, and that is, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to automating tests? So I'm going to click launch on that poll. It should be in front of you right now. And I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to answer. Before I do that, there's people who will watch this webinar after the fact. I don't think it's visible to them, so I'm just going to read out the answers. The question is, what's the biggest challenge when it comes to automated tests? And the answers are not enough time to automate everything, not enough budget for additional efforts, a lack of internal skills, the fact that the product might be changing a lot and therefore tests become flaky, or a product poorly suited to automation, or another factor. And if you think another factor is important, please do put it in the Q&A, because I think it'll be really interesting for the discussion at the end. I'm going to keep that poll open for the next minute and a half while I explain what global app testing is, and then I'm going to close it, and we're going to talk about it after the webinar at the end, just before the Q&A. So first, global app testing. What are we? Who are we to tell you about automating your tests? Global app testing at its heart is a community of testers. There's 70,000 testers around the world. They sit ready to test different software products at the moment that you want to launch them from your TestRail dashboard or however else. When we set up the business 8 years ago, the business has been running, and over that time, we've been fortunate enough to work with some of the biggest and best and greatest software businesses in the world. There's Meta, there's Google, if we can have the next slide, Artem. And there's the other businesses that you can see on your screen right now, along with hundreds of others. Working really closely and consultatively with them has given us a window into how they think about their QA and how they think about these kinds of questions. So based on the understanding that we've built over that 8 years, our founders wrote, who are two very wise people and are on this call, a best-selling book. Leading quality, went to the top of the Amazon QA charts. It's got plaudits for all these amazing companies, Twitter, Slack, eBay, and many others. And that is the thought leadership acumen that we're bringing to this question. And that is why when you hear Artem start to speak in a minute, he really is the man with all the answers. So without much further ado, I am going to hand over to Heather. I'm going to end this poll, first of all. So I'm going to share the results of the poll at the end of the webinar. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Heather. Heather is a product marketing manager at TestRail, and she is going to tell you a little bit about the research that kicked this whole thing off. Over to you now, Heather.
Yes, thank you so much, Adam. So first, I want to start off by introducing TestRail and what TestRail is for those in our audience that are maybe not as familiar. And TestRail is a test management platform that helps customers boost confidence throughout your entire testing process at scale. And we do that by helping our users increase test coverage, centralize all their testing, track test progress in real time, and create visibility for their stakeholders. And when it comes to test coverage, we really want to help teams deliver quality software that behaves exactly as it's expected to all of the time. At least that's our user's perfect world scenario, of course. But when applications in production don't always work as they should, support tickets can pile up. You can have precious development resources that are spent on hot fixes that tend to be lengthy. They can cost the company time, money, and potentially even reputation, not to mention customer churn. And so in order to avoid such risk, companies will allocate resources to test the application, assuring the application's quality before a release is shipped to customers. And to measure that quality and ensure what should be tested has been tested, teams will use TestRail to thoroughly document and accurately define foreseeable use cases, in addition to using some of the powerful built-in reporting to identify the coverage that they have and any coverage gaps that they might have. When it comes to centralizing all their testing in an effort to have a single source of truth for all of the activities, whether they're manual, whether they're automated activities, they're all housed within TestRail. So manual testers can easily design and document test cases, while their SDET or test automation counterparts can push results and testing details into the platform through an API, CLI tool, or webhooks. While some applications are mainly tested with automation, I think most of us know that most applications require both automation and manual testing, where manual testers are encouraged to flag tests that can be automated in order to increase how often those tests can be run in the future. So housing all of these activities gives QA leads and managers an opportunity to obtain a holistic view of their testing activities. And when it comes time for the execution and assessment of progress, test results need to be analyzed or to gauge the quality of a release. So we need to look at defects and ensure that they're well documented and reported quickly for fast turnaround from development until test pass. So individual workloads need to be balanced too. And as the tests are run and deadlines kind of loom ahead, our leaders want to measure progress and identify bottlenecks and take action before delays pile up. And that kind of leads us into how TestRail starts to create visibility for stakeholders, because that's a huge piece of the puzzle when it comes to QA. And we know that testers aren't the only people that are concerned about the progress and outcome of testing. We have developers that need to understand context around failed tests to understand which defects need to be fixed. We have people in roles like business analysts and product managers that frequently ask questions from testing leaders to gauge the quality and progress of a release. We have emails that might be written and meetings attended to find answers to pressing questions. And then quality leaders want to include more people earlier in the testing process to promote information sharing and faster turnaround times. So information around testing is usually broken up between stakeholders, from product requirements, test cases, test results, to defect management. And TestRail's built-in reporting and ability to schedule some of that reporting really helps create that visibility easily for your stakeholders. And if you can move to the next slide. So after all the introduction of TestRail, one of the really great things that we do is run an annual survey. And we have about 70 questions on this survey, but there was one key piece of information that we wanted to focus on when talking with GAT. So the rise of software development methodologies that require a continuous and streamlined workflow, such as Agile and DevOps, have really pushed teams to automate as much as possible. So every year, TestRail runs this research survey to gather information about the industry. And one specific finding that was very interesting revolved around automation goals. We first asked our survey participants, question 1, what percentage of your tests are currently automated versus manual? So most recently in 2020 and 2021, our respondents told us that they currently automate about 35 and 38% respectively. So we've consistently seen that respondents automate approximately 40% of their tests over the past 4 years. Then when we asked the same respondents, what percentage of your tests do you expect to automate in the next year? They told us they wanted to automate about 54% of their tests in 2020 and 56% of their tests in 21. So here we have consistently a significant higher percentage than the amount of tests that are currently automated. And more specifically, our respondents told us through the survey over the past 4 years, they want to increase their automated testing by approximately 20%. So since 2018, respondents have expected or wanted to automate over half of their tests. Compared to the percentage of tests that respondents have actually automated, this data indicates to us that they succeeded in automating approximately 20% fewer tests than expected every single year. So moving from manual to automated testing without impeding current development and testing processes requires more than just hiring an automation engineer. And we see that reaching automation goals is a struggle from this data. You have frameworks that potentially need to be built, tooling that might need to be implemented, employees have to be trained, and even more than that. So these things take time and effort. And doing all of that without compromising the quality of the software being released can be a significant undertaking, but it's doable. And this is really where the global app testing and TestRail integration gives QA teams a pretty huge advantage. And so I'm going to pass it back over now.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Perfect.
I think it's such a fascinating piece of research, because on the one hand, I think it's obviously about what teams are able to execute on and what they can do and their workflows. But on the other, I think it captures a kind of groupthink where again and again and again, people think they're going to automate more than they are. Anyway, yes, I'm going to introduce Artem now. He is the man with all of the answers, and he's going to talk through our solution to it. Artem.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adam, for the introduction. And thank you very much, Heather, for sharing the results of your survey. So what do these results tell us? So the first thing they tell us is that teams want more automation in their testing. And that makes perfect sense, right? Why wouldn't you want a robot to execute your dull, repetitive testing tasks so that you can focus more of your time and effort on more creative activities rather. So the ideal scenario that a lot of teams want to achieve is that the majority of testing is automated, and then there are some tests that are either impossible to automate or just difficult enough so that the ROI isn't really there. And yes, fine, we can execute those manually every now and then. However, what we actually see from the survey results is that there is a gap there. There are tests that could be automated, but for one reason or another are not automated. This could be because this is new functionality that hasn't yet been automated in terms of testing. Or maybe on the contrary, it's legacy functionality from since before we started investing into automation. Or maybe that it's functionality that changed sufficiently enough that the tests are now outdated and require updating. We also see that some teams struggle with flaky or otherwise unreliable tests. And these tests, again, need to be covered by manual execution to make sure we have a reliable result. So these both, they form together this automation gap that we see in the survey results. And of course, since these are not automated, we need to cover those with manual human tests, and therefore we are increasing the daily burden on the testing team. A lot of you might be familiar with this matrix that shows us the work that we're doing based on its urgency and importance. So urgency goes in the vertical scale here, and the importance across the horizontal. I will relabel the axis slightly to make it more relevant to what we're talking about. So on the vertical axis here, we're going to talk about the short-term value of the work that we're doing. So high short-term value here at the top, low short-term value here at the bottom. And across the horizontal, we're going to look at the long-term value of our activities. And if we plot our testing activities here on this chart, we can start to see where the problem comes in. So you see the manual testing that we're doing it sits here in the top left corner of this matrix. It has high short-term value. So for example, we have a release next week, and we need to make sure that the functionality that we are releasing is actually working as expected. So the value of this testing that we're doing is really high for the short term. But once that release is out and we move beyond it, the long-term value of the testing that we just completed goes down pretty much to zero. Next time we need to release something, we need to repeat that manual testing over again. And the automation here sits pretty much in the opposite side of the spectrum here. Its short-term value is pretty low when we're investing into more automation. If you have a release next week, it's much more efficient to test things manually than it is to write automated tests. However, over the long term, as we execute those tests over and over again, we start to see the return on the investment of effort of creating those tests and maintaining them. So over the long term, automation has higher value than manual testing. And actually, as humans, we tend to often prioritize the short term because the value of it is so much nearer to us and so much clearer that it makes more sense for us to spend time here because the reward is going to come very shortly. When we actually add the additional testing that comes from the automation gap, the problem becomes even worse. So the volume of testing that we need to execute manually is greater, and therefore we spend even more time in this short term, having less time available for automation. So we move from focusing on the long term to the short term. We move from being proactive to being reactive on the latest, most urgent need, and from making steady progress to where we want to be with automation to maintaining the status quo. So if you imagine yourself here on the left at your current state and where you want to be here on your right, and this is the path to get there, every time you get distracted from this path for something like a manual test run, your path to get to your automation goal becomes longer. And the more often you do it, the longer that path is going to take. And remember, these goals are not static even. They move as we progress with developing more and more functionality. So it becomes almost a constant game of catch up. So we want to achieve this goal, but it moves away further as we progress towards it. And it's like this famous parable of, I don't have time to sharpen my saw because I'm too busy sewing. So what is the solution to this problem? So one potential solution could be to delegate your short-term testing needs so that you can spend more time in this longer-term value quadrants, and you can delegate your short-term testing to global app testing. Global app testing is a community of freelance testers all around the world. We provide on-demand manual testing anytime you need it, including overnight and on weekends. We offer test case execution and exploratory testing, and we deliver results directly into TestRail and your issue tracker, whether it's Jira or some other issue tracker. Our ambition is to make manual testing feel like automation. So it plugs right into the tools that you're using, and you can trigger it from your build pipelines. It's fast and it's scalable, and it is working when you are not. And you receive the results and process the results in a unified way. So with that, I'd like to pass over to Diogo, who's a solution architect at TestRail, to take us through the details of the integration.
Hey, thanks for the introduction, Artem. So let's dig deeper into the details of the actual integration and what people can expect from it. So on this slide, what we're looking at here is a diagram of the fully integrated workflow between TestRail and global app testing. What you get with this seamless integration is a centralized workflow that allows you to request on-demand testing at any time straight from TestRail. So what you do is you start by building up your test coverage within TestRail and planning your test runs to maximize your efficiency. And then as soon as you're done planning any test run, you can schedule it to be executed through global app testing just at the click of a button right on TestRail. So with thousands of testers working around the clock on global app testing, you can launch hundreds of tests simultaneously, and you'll start getting the results and uncovering issues in your application like almost immediately. So these results are reported to TestRail, which centralizes all information and enables visibility across your organization with real-time progress, and then allows you to also report on that in a non-real-time fashion as well. So while the results are coming in, you'll be able to see the details on TestRail, and the integration also allows you to go from there to global app testing through links. So you can check useful test evidence, such as, for instance, screen recordings the testers from global app testing may have done. And then when the results are all in, you can manage them as you would manage any test data in TestRail. So you can take action on those results, you can generate valuable reports and insights, you can integrate with your issue tracker, report effects from TestRail, etc. So everything is in sync. And next slide, please. Okay. So summing up some of the key points about the integration. So it seamlessly launches tests and quickly receives results in TestRail. So the whole process is streamlined through TestRail. And then with professional testers available around the clock, you'll have your results delivered to you in no time. And this will help you scale up testing very efficiently. Then ultimately, this will allow you to release your resources to focus on bulking your test automation. And this is very important because from my personal experience as a test automation team lead, one of the biggest challenges teams face when trying to build up on automation is that testers are usually completely overwhelmed with manual testing, because a lot of times you plan to do something, but then things may derail, you may need to retest, etc. And that takes a lot longer than you expect. And that prevents them from investing time in planning and developing test automation, as well as improving their automation skills, which they may also lack. And so having global app testing at the distance of a click in your TestRail instance will definitely help your testers find the time they need to invest in automation and be successful at it. And now back to you, Artem. Show us how this all works in practice.
Thank you very much, Diogo. And yes, indeed, let's actually try and launch a test and see how it works. So what you'll see in front of you is maybe familiar to the majority of you. It's a TestRail instance that I have here up and running with a project, and I'm looking at the test cases page here. So in my project, I have a set of test cases, a pretty simple set of test cases across a couple of sections. The test cases are just a set of instructions with the expected results, fairly simple, really. So in this demo project, I would like to demonstrate you how you can launch a test with global app testing. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the test run section here and create a test run. So I need to provide some basic details here. So let's name this test something like, let's say, regression test, build such and such, put in some description. In this case, let me put in the staging URL. So this will be the URL of the application that I would like our testers to test. And then I will include all the test cases in my project and create the test run right there. So now I've created a test run, and this can be my dashboard, my homepage for the execution of this testing run. I can see the results, I can monitor the progress, and I can manage the execution by assigning these test cases to specific testers on my team and watch them report the results through TestRail. But I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to delegate this test to global app testing. So here on the right-hand side, we see the global app testing side panel with the launch this test button. And if I click it, I will go to the UI of global app testing platform. And due to the integration that is already set up between TestRail and global app testing, I can see that on this confirmation, I see the details of the test, the name, how many test cases it includes, the description. Just need to provide some additional information. In this case, I don't need any credentials or resources, and I'm ready to confirm the launch. And once I do that, just in a couple of seconds, I will see that the test has been successfully launched, and the testers will now receive this request and start testing. So while they're doing that, we will come back to our presentation here. And here I'd like to pass over to John Smerick, the CTO of Line 10. Line 10 is a joint customer of both global app testing and TestRail, and John will tell us the experience of using both. Over to you, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Artem. I'm a little bit challenged with internet connectivity, so if I actually put my video off once in a while, that's where that's coming from. So excuse me for that. I'm at Spaces and it's not a very good connection today. But I've just launched, just to add what Artem said, I've just launched, my team has just launched basically a global app testing of over 150 test cases for a major enterprise that wants to actually validate UAT that we're actually trying to launch this quarter. So it actually is a very powerful technique. So we're just in the process of that, scrambling to make this webinar at the same time. So I thought that was very appropriate. We've had some challenges, right, at line 10 here. Our first major challenge was line 10 was faced with a perfect storm in terms of testing. We literally had 6 different products in various stages, all coming together in a common completion date. All different customers. Some had multiple versions of the same application, but the volume of work, especially the testing, exceeded our current capacity. And so that's when I looked around and identified crowd testing as one of those key things that we need to do. We couldn't automate it. We didn't have enough time. We didn't have enough testers. So there was an immediate need to ramp up testing to keep pace with development. And GET allowed line 10 to test in volume as development was completed. It also enabled us to actually do all the testing after hours overnight, right, which was key because we'd hit the ground running at 8, 9 a.m. in the morning of all the defects, if there were any, with very, very detailed videos of what those defects were right in TestRail, which I think is an extremely important part because there's not a lot of going back and forth. Look at the video. Yeah, I see the problem. I fixed it. So it was a huge boon for us, right? So that was our first challenge. It was the all the perfect storm of testing. Challenge 2, our e-commerce platform. We've got basically two groups of platforms here, Ecom and delivery. But on Ecom, we need to test across the various platforms, not just in the UK, but right across Europe and Hong Kong and Australia and Canada, right? So the different browsers, language, iOS, Android, we have access to the browsers. I think everybody does, but the different devices that people use with Ecom, especially in fast food, is where we're actually targeting. 80 to 90% of all your transactions or store's transactions are on a phone, right? So it's key that those are tested, right? And the different variations of those phones, like the last 3 or 4 variations. So that was a key thing for us. We did not have the budget to actually buy all those different devices. So that was, GAT allowed testing across all the platforms. We just specified in the test runs which ones we actually wanted tested. For each test, they did this exact same thing 2 or 3 times for a test on Android or iOS or the web browser. And we've got all those different results. It was quite interesting results because, one web browser or even on Safari, iOS would act a little bit different, right? So that was a key thing. That was a great challenge for challenge 2. Challenge 3, smoke testing a complex product, right? Line 10 has a complex e-commerce platform where the core development may affect multiple independent clients. This is not something you would purposely design in, but I think most companies quickly got into these type of problems when they're startups. They build, they make changes, there's tech debt. And so changing a particular function for one enterprise client may affect another client that had nothing to do with that functionality. Not a great place to be in, but it's reality. So smoke testing, when we actually released for one client, we were able to do 3 or 4 clients at the same time, which was volume again, which is great for us. So that was a great challenge that it got met. Our next challenge, challenge 4, had limited feedback from customers, right? Usability improvements to the flow, etc. So we actually asked GAT to do a few basically exploratory tests and to give us feedback on what they felt the flow of a particular ecom or delivery platform in this particular case felt like from a customer point of view, right? Largely when you're in product and you do product development, you get this back from your clients and your customers, but you have to have something out there. That gave us a really good way of getting a lot of feedback from actual users on different devices and web browsers very, very quickly. I think it's one of those hidden gems that actually GAT brings that you just don't, they just don't probably advertise as much, but it was a great thing for us. And then finally, my last one is challenge 5, right? Lots of products working together. One of our products on the e-commerce side integrates with a aggregation platform that puts together a lot of POS integrations with marketplace integrations like Uber Eats, Deliveroo, with basically a menu program and an order program. It puts it all together and very, very complex, right? So one of the things, one of the challenges we actually had for GAT was like, look, this is very complex. It's a manual process. We have to set up our marketplaces, we have to set up our delivery places, we have to set up our ecom. The tester does this. Our testers would normally do this. We'd have to put the payloads. This is the transaction I want to follow the way through. The challenge to GAT was, can your testers do that? And the result was, yeah, they can, right? A very, very astute crowd. What we did was we videotaped, we set up a little seminar with them, meeting with them. We videotaped, one of our testers took them through it, we recorded it, and that's pretty much all we had to do. And they were off to the races, and they were able to test. So if anybody says that crowd testing can't do complex testing, yes, they can, right? So that was a huge benefit for us as well. There is one more challenge. I know I only had 5, but there is one more challenge that we do have, is a lot of our enterprise customers today are actually asking for validated UAT. And that validated UAT is one of these key things. Not every enterprise customer will ask for this, but all enterprise customers do some sort of manual testing. What they want from us is, here's a list of our test scripts, validation that they've been tested, along with the videos that they've been tested. And so that's another added benefit that we're actually kicked off today, like 5 minutes before this meeting started, for one of our enterprise customers. So it's another win with GAT.
Fantastic. Is that all, John?
Yeah, sorry, I kind of ended it abruptly, but is there any questions on what we've done and we found at line 10?
Thank you so much, John. That's great. If you do have questions for John, just stick them in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end or during as well. But yeah, that was really, really interesting. Thank you so much. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Artem, it's time to actually get some results back.
And indeed, you are not mistaken. So the testers had some time to execute the test cases. So let's look at the results. I'm back here in the TestRail interface, the same test run dashboard, and you can see it looks a little different because we now have results. We have 5 passed test cases, 1 failed test cases, everything's tested. So if I just scroll down to the individual test cases, I will see the results of those test cases here, which ones are passed or which ones are failed. And I can click into each individual test case, scroll down to the results section, and see the details of the execution of each test case. So what you'll see here is there's this result from tester number 1, which marks the test case result as passed, but we also have 2 more confirmations from 2 other testers of this passing result. So this is very important. We never give you just one result of a test case. We always provide you with multiple executions of the same test case, so that even if one tester makes a mistake and submits an invalid result, there are other testers who can retest this and confirm or indeed change the result. So in this case, you can see each of the tester results, and I have a link here. If I click this, I'll get taken to the global app testing interface, where I can see the details of this particular test case execution, including, like John said, a video of the entire process of tester going through those steps and observing the results and recording them. So that was a passing test case. We also had one failing test case right here at the bottom. So if I enter the failing test case, we see the same situation here. We have the first tester reporting it as a failed result, and we have 2 more testers to confirm this result. And in addition to the link, I can also see what is the exact problem. The delete button is available on recipes that are created by other users. So if I click into this result, again, I get taken to the global app testing platform, where I can see the details of the execution, where particularly this this test case failed, what was the actual result versus expected, and again, a video demonstrating the entire execution process and the actual problem that's being reported, so you can investigate it and fix it. So hopefully this makes sense, and you can see now how in the same interface, this test run dashboard on TestRail, you can integrate all of your kinds of testing together and monitor the progress and the results of all of those kinds of testing together. Internal manual testing, external manual testing through global app testing, and also your automation. So this becomes really powerful. So with that, we can now move on to looking at the survey results, can't we, Adam?
Thank you so much, Artem. Can I ask you to skip straight to the next slide, though? I will present the poll results in just a moment. Before I do, because I know some people will need to get off, we will continue the Q&A a few minutes past the end of the webinar. So just in case you need to rush, here is the link to sign up to a free trial of global app testing, TestRail, or both. So if you get out your phone and you scan this QR code, you'll see that on the landing page, there are 2 different buttons. One takes you to a form. You can sign straight up to TestRail and start your free trial straight away. Below it, there is a meeting booking tool. We just need to have a short conversation with you, and we can get you started with a free trial of global app testing as well. If you launch your first test with us before November 10th, we will also send you a signed copy of the leading quality book I mentioned earlier. Anyway, that's it. I'll leave that slide on there. And then without much further ado, I will present the results of the poll. So I have clicked share. So can everybody in the chat, can you confirm you can see the results of the poll? I think we should be able to. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to just hand over to Artem to react. Just to, say for the people watching after who can't see it, the most common reason that people don't automate more tests is that their products are changing and tests become flaky, followed very closely by there's not enough time to automate everything. So Artem, what do you think of that?
Oh, thank you, Adam, for sharing the results. It's quite interesting, actually, right? So the product is changing, has beat the not enough time, but it's such a slight margin, but just 2%. But it's very clear that the maintenance cost of automated tests is just as much of a problem as the the time it takes to write those tests. And that reminds me of a conversation that I had with a QA lead a few months ago about the challenges of automation. And he told me a story that their automation engineer has left the company and they stopped maintaining their automated suite. Before that, they were covering about half of their testing through automation. However, in the space of just 2 months, they went back to 0. So after not maintaining the tests for just 2 months, because of the product always changing underneath, their entire automation suite became obsolete, and they needed to go back to fully manual execution. So it's very interesting that the audience here highlights that the product changing is a massive challenge that is is winning here actually, and on the same level as not enough time to to invest in automation.
Can we get a comment from TestRail? Diogo, can I tempt you out to react to this?
Yes, sure. So yeah, this is actually very common. I felt it for the first person actually when I was leading the test automation team. We would have a batch of tests created. It was actually quite fast. We already had a lot of practice creating the tests, and then we would hand them over to teams to maintain those. And then what would happen is that after a while, the tests would become unstable. We would start finding a little bit of flakiness. Sometimes it wasn't even flakiness. It's just actually the product changing, and you need to adapt fast to that, or else your tests will lose value. And the more tests start failing because the product is changing, the less confidence people will have in your automated test suite. And eventually it can happen, what Artem just said, you can just abandon a project where you spent a lot of time in. So if you have time for maintenance, you can avoid failing to maintain an automated test project. So yeah, this is very, very common.
Thanks very much. And finally, I know we've got 1 minute before we're going to move on to Q&A. It's the formal end of the webinar there, and we will start answering questions. Could I ask Christoph? Christoph is a senior developer here at Global App Testing. He's really interesting, and I would love to hear his response to this poll.
Of course. So what I can tell you is that even our team, like just lately, we've moved from Selenium to one of the newest technologies that we have for automation, which is Playwright. And flakiness is still a bit of a problem, a bit of an issue, despite having a better tool. And as Diogo just said, right, when product is being developed, when it's changing, we sometimes have this feeling that it might be something bad, something wrong, that the product is changing. Once again, our tests are no longer working as they should. But this is actually a normal life cycle of a product. Initially, we will have a lot of changes because we need to verify, we need to validate if the new feature that we've just built is the right one. So we will often change it initially. And that's why this problem persists, because of the life cycle of software.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So it is now 4:45. So if you do have to rush, thank you very much for joining us. Otherwise, we're going to spend the next 10 minutes just answering the questions that have come through. So please stay. If you do have to run, we will send you a link to the recording so you can catch up. But please do stay if you can, because we've got some really interesting questions here. So the first question that I would like to ask, this is from Phil, and I think it's a question for the global app testing side. So maybe Artem, if you could answer this. It's how can an outsourced team or a crowd testing team like Global App Testing understand my product well enough that it won't be a problem during the testing process?
Yeah, great question. Thank you very much, Phil. Before I answer this, I just wanted to comment that I've skimmed through the questions submitted. There are some fantastic questions here. I'm afraid that we're probably not going to have enough time to answer them all, but there are some really, really good questions that I would like to have the opportunity to answer. So if we don't have enough time, so hopefully we can follow up at a later conversation. So in terms of the question, which was how do you get external testers to understand the product well enough to test it? This is a common challenge for pretty much the majority of our customers. Of course, you can have like a really simple B2C application that doesn't really need any education on the product itself, and then there's not really an issue. But this is not the case for quite a big set of our customers. So there needs to be some level of communication of product knowledge to the testers so that they can test effectively. Actually, John mentioned like in his pod earlier today, one way to potentially solve this. So just to remind you that Line 10 have recorded a tester going through the key bits of the application so that our testers, they can brief themselves on the application before beginning testing. And there are also other techniques to share this critical product knowledge with the testers to make sure that the testing is successful. Just want to make sure you understand that, you know, it's a real problem, and we have many different ways of dealing with it depending on your particular situation.
Thanks very much, Artem. I've got another question here for the TestRail side. This user asks, is it possible to have visibility into the test results of global app testing in TestRail reports? And what kind of reports can I generate? Maybe that's one for you, Heather.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Adam. So I think like Artem showed during the demonstration there of the integration, TestRail does centralize all of your testing activities, whether they're automated or manual, and whether they're run through crowd testing, like with the GET example that Artem was giving us. When it comes to reports that you can generate, TestRail has a variety of pretty robust built-in reports. There are reports for test cases, such as an activity summary. Probably one of the most common reports and most popular that we see run is coverage for references, which shows the test case coverage for any references you might have in your coverage matrix. We can provide reports on defects as well, and these reports will cover tests that were run with the help of GAT, or if you have other testers that you're having design and execute test cases through TestRail. So defects, reports on results as well. We can do a comparison for cases, which will show the results for test cases in a coverage and comparison matrix. There's a whole lot of different possibilities there. But in summary, in short, it is possible to have visibility into the test results of global app testing within TestRail reports.
Fantastic. Thank you, Heather. We've got a question from Christian here. Christian asks, what will happen on cases where GAT testers find bugs? How will they file them? Maybe one for you, Artem.
Oh, yes. Thank you. So that's actually a great question, Christian, because testing is not limited to just executing test cases and reporting whether those fail or whether those are passing. So yes, absolutely. We do have the capability for testers to, in addition to reporting test case results, to also report bugs that they found outside of the execution of those test cases, and submit those through to you. And we have lots of cool functionality to process those bugs on the platform and triage them and export them into your issue tracker. So that's definitely covered for.
Thanks, Artem. We do have a question for John. I've just seen that question is, how do you decide between sending a test to global app testing and doing it internally yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. Largely, it's by the volume that we actually have to do. So typically what we would do is we would do smoke tests or critical use cases manually, like an end-to-end and or particular sensitive type of testing around payment or something like that internally, because we could actually do that with our test cards and stuff like that, especially on the e-commerce. And the rest we'd actually outsource to GAT. That'd be one way we would do it. But yeah, it really depends on the situation, because literally we have hundreds and thousands of tests, right? So we have to be very selective in what we do internally. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, thank you so much. We've got a question for Lalitha. I think that's pronounced Lalitha, for Christoph. Do they also do API testing? I think Lalitha's talking about global app testing there, but it might also be worth mentioning about TestRail. Christoph, can you answer the question?
Of course. So in case of API testing, as you can imagine, this is more advanced than just, going through the UI and giving your thoughts as a regular user would do. And since this is more complex, this is maybe not like the most common case that we operate with, but I'm not saying that we cannot do it. We offer quite flexible offer to more demanding customers as well. And in such scenario, I think that maybe we could do it.
Fantastic. And one for Artem from Jeff. How are all these global app testers accessing my system? I suppose there's also systems with, logins and where there's complex components. So it'd be interesting to hear you talk about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the most typical way that's used across our customers is a staging environment that can be publicly accessible if you know the URL. Obviously, in most of those cases, there's a login system, so you cannot actually access the actual software that you're testing without a login, but at least you can access the URL. And then there is a system to communicate the login credentials to the testers that will execute the test. Actually, in the demo, you might have seen the credentials field there for this exact purpose. However, there are also cases where the system under test cannot be exposed publicly, even if it's protected with a login. In those cases, there is a capability to set up like a whitelist for a certain IP address. We have a VPN for this exact purpose for our testers that can VPN into our sort of common gateway for the testers, and then you can whitelist that gateway for the testers to access your system. So hopefully this answers the access question, but it's a really good question. Thank you.
I can maybe add one more thing that if you are using mobile apps, we can also use builds which are going from like Google Store Beta or TestFlight as well.
Good point. Firebase and TestFlight are really common ways to distribute development builds of mobile applications to our testers.
Jonathan asks, how do we integrate global app testing into TestRail? I think that's a very good question.
Yeah, absolutely. So first step is you scan that QR code and go through the form over there. Speak to us. You get access to the an account with global app testing, and then there is a setup guide for the integration to make sure we're integrated into your TestRail instance, into your TestRail account. I don't think like sharing the technical details of it is necessary, but there is a fairly straightforward installation guide that you can follow.
Yes, I will be adding that installation guide to the chat in just a moment. In the meantime, I've got a question. I think this is for both TestRail and global app testing. So maybe if TestRail could answer first. The main question I have, writes Gus, is does TestRail / global app testing have a possibility with a direct integration? And he mentioned SAP, S/4H, SFCC, Jira, and Atlassian. I don't know, that's quite a list of different pieces of software, but I don't know if you briefly want to talk about the other software that you integrate with, Heather or Diogo.
Yeah, I think I can take that one. So yeah, we do have a lot of integrations, mainly for issue trackers. So Jira is one of them. And you can definitely have a direct integration there because TestRail is actually a standalone tool. And what we pride ourselves in is having a lot of ways to integrate with TestRail and having a lot of integrations. For instance, with Jira, we have a two-way integration. We also have an app on the Jira side that fetches information from TestRail, and we can fetch information and create information on Jira from the TestRail UI as well. So yeah, there's all sorts of possibilities for integration. Some are out of the box. Some you would have to create them on your own, customize them. But yeah, the answer here is yes, at least for the Jira one. For SAP, I don't think we have anything at this point. But there's a lot of possibilities to do that.
And on the global app testing side, Artem, do you want to pick up on our integration with Jira?
Definitely. We do have out-of-the-box integration with Jira. Obviously, how can we not? Jira is like the most popular issue tracker in the world these days. So, of course, we have integration with Jira. In terms of SAP, no, we don't have an out-of-the-box integration with SAP. However, I do want to point out that we do have multiple integration methods that will allow you to plug your global app testing capabilities into different systems, even without having out-of-the-box integration. These include, we have a Reach API, we have webhooks so that you can get notified about the progress of testing or other types of events. And there's also a command line interface that you can call directly from a build pipeline or anywhere else, really.
Thank you very much. I have managed to find the link for the installation guide for global app testing and TestRail. I'm also going to add a data sheet in just a second. I can see that I've sent it to hosts only, so I'm going to share that with everybody after the next question. Jose asks, does global app testing have coverage in the Latin American market? One for Artem, I think.
Yes, definitely, 100%. So we have, what's the number? 189 countries, I believe, is the right number. I think I'll get corrected if that's the wrong number. But basically, pretty much nearly every country we have some presence. We have testers available there. And one of the powers of global app testing, if you need that sort of thing, is to target specific geographies so that you can make sure that your functionality that's specific to that geography works well. And I assure you, Latin America is very well covered.
We've got another question here. How do global app testing testers handle sensitive information? If the platform needed to be tested has sensitive information inside, it needed is test data, there's GDPR, there's all of that. I can see that Christoph's got his hand up. One for you, Christoph.
Absolutely. So sensitive information is like a big concern for us. And right now, our approach is that since this is a complex topic, we need to find out like how your system works end to end. How is it processing the data? Because we don't want as well to hurt our crowd. That's one of the concerns. And we also don't want to store any data which is sensitive on our own platform. So in case they will need to report like bugs or problems, what is necessary from our end to make sure that they even accidentally didn't submit any sensitive information. So that's our approach.
Amazing. I can see that it has gone past 5 o'clock. So that is all of the questions we're going to have time for today. Anything else? Again, we are going to get through. We're going to answer all of them and we're going to send those answers to you in an email shortly after. Thank you so much. And if you have booked a meeting with us, thank you so much for that as well. We look forward to talking to you with one of our QA experts. And obviously through this QR code on the screen now, last chance to scan, you can sign up directly to a TestRail free trial as well. So do sign up and just try the software because it is really, really good. Thank you very much all for joining. I am going to end the webinar now and goodbye and have a lovely evening if you're here in the UK and have a great day if you're in the United States. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Everyone.
Thank y'all.